Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Genuine APBT. On today's episode, I want to talk about chasing dead dogs. That's a term that a lot of you might not be familiar with. And when somebody says chasing dead dogs, it could mean, and it usually means, when someone's breeding program or most of it is focused or centered on recreating a certain dog or two or three dogs that are in the pedigree, regardless of how far back. But having said that, I must say to begin with that in these dogs, there is a lot of hypocrisy and dishonesty. And it is very common, and more so with social media, that you see a lot of people jumping on and off bandwagons pretty frequently. On one day, it's possible that somebody might say breed best to best, or pedigrees don't really matter. The dog makes the pedigree. Dogs are where you find them, or good dogs are where you find them. And so this person might sound like they're not really into the pedigree. The pedigree, again, doesn't really matter. They're into the dog that's in front of them, right? But then a few days later, the same people are all about naming dogs that are in their pedigree, dogs that are dead, but dogs that are in their pedigree. Some of these same people even go as far as to post their pedigrees online or put them up in their video. And so what I think it's done to an extent is that when somebody is said to be chasing dead dogs, it's kind of looked upon as a negative stigma. You know, somebody might look at it and say, "Oh, come on, you're not about breeding the good dogs that you know of and the good dogs that are in your first, second, third, fourth pedigree. You're out there chasing famous dogs that are way back in your pedigree." But let's be honest, if we're really being honest here, any of us, and I mean any of us, if we select a dog that we love, that we know is in the back of our pedigrees, even way back, if there was a way to go back and get that exact blood from that exact dog, we would do it in a heartbeat. Very few people would not do that. I've never met one in the 30 some odd years that I have in the dogs. Most people would do that. So I say there's nothing wrong with that. Now, if your whole program is about trying to chase dead dogs and that's your only focus, then sadly what's going to happen is you're going to miss out, and you're not going to filter the dogs that are actually in your hands, or their parents, or the first four generations. You're always going to be focused way back. And that could be detrimental, not only to your bloodline or to a strain, but to the breed as a whole, or any dog that you come in contact with. So I would say to chase dead dogs and to be solely focused on that, that's not a good thing. But it is good to an extent. I mean, everybody wants to preserve that. So if you're breeding Boyle's dogs, if you're breeding Jeep dogs, Red Boy dogs, I know that there is tons of purebred or very pure dogs on top and on bottom that are sorrel dogs in our bloodline. I know that. And it's wonderful to try to bring some of those traits up close. That's understandable. But at the same time, and equally important, is we assess and we are very critical of the actual dogs that we have, like Zephyr and Maple. We look at their traits and we look at what we want to preserve in the actual dogs. And we know their grandparents, their great-great-grandparents. We know their parents firsthand. We've seen them, we've touched them, all of that. So we know, we've dealt with them. But we do look back to the pedigree, and we look at the history, and we say, are these dogs matching up to the dogs that we love in the pedigree? So I think it's a combination of both things. To say that the pedigree doesn't matter, again, and I'm not talking about pedigree doesn't matter with people that don't have them at all, but people that do have pedigree dogs. And they kind of look down at the people that are breeding, strongly because they love the dogs in the pedigree. That's hypocritical, again, because those people are the first ones, whenever it's convenient or whenever the bandwagon's going that way, they'll jump all over it and they'll say, yeah, I'm breeding, XYZ dogs. And like if their dogs are better, and so I've seen that. So I think we shouldn't do that. I think we should have a good balance, of, yes, loving the dogs in the history, loving the pedigree, and at the same time, being really careful and selective to preserve the traits that are according to those strains, according to those bloodlines, and trying to bring them up close. And that's what, the COI is all about. That's what trying to, duplicate and make strong and the alleles and all that stuff, that's what you're trying to do, because it's kind of like I look at it as a fishing net. The higher your COI is, when you're line breeding and inbreeding, I look at it as a fishing net. The wider and further that fishing net is going to go out, and your probability, the chances of you bringing in some of those good traits that were possessed by some of the dogs that are way, way back in the pedigree might come up. Now, another thing briefly before I end this video is it's interesting to hear people talk about pedigrees and kind of analyze them and be so focused in the first 4 generations, only because, like in ours, if you look at our first 4 generations, you're not going to see any dogs that say sorrels, right? But then when you start going back a little bit more, not much further, but a little bit more, then you start getting a lot of the sorrel blood. You get some of the Jeep, I'm sorry, not Jeep, but you get some of the Red Boy blood, you get some Chinaman stuff in there with some really calculated outs that were done. So you get some other stuff like that, but it's interesting how people look at the pedigrees and they go, oh, only first 4 generations. Well, let me tell you something. A lot of these dogs that are really, really famous, they were decades ago. They were 50, 40, 30, 35 years ago. You're not going to see them unless you're fortunate enough to hook up with somebody that has frozen semen. Then you're going to see them in the first 4 generations. Other than that, it is up to you to be able to follow it back. And that's why it's so important when you're breeding to be able to truly and honestly assess the dogs that you have before you, and then compare them to the historical traits of the particular dogs that are in your bloodline that you are trying to replicate. You're not necessarily chasing an exact dead dog, but you are replicating those strains that made the bloodline, or I'm sorry, those traits that made the strain and the bloodline desirable. Anyways, I just thought I'd talk about that briefly. There is tons and tons more to be said about this. I am working Zephyr out, but it's going slowly because a lot of things came into my life recently where I had to dedicate way more time to work and some other personal issues that are good. But it just, the time to work him out the way I wanted to is just not panning out for right now. And I want to be consistent when I dedicate those 12 weeks to him. I don't want to start him and then miss 2 or 3 days. It doesn't work that way. Then you can't do an honest assessment of your dog when you're working him out. It has to be a consistent, dedicated 12-week program when you don't skip a day. The program has to be solid, and the feeding and the rest and everything else has to be solid. So we'll get back on that. I just wanted to reach out and do a quick video and just talk about this subject. So thanks again to everybody that watches the videos, everyone that's subscribed. Sorry, I just like to put out content that is meaningful, so it takes time. And remember, know these dogs, love these dogs, and raise them responsibly. There's a lot of people that are just not doing that, and they're bringing a lot of harm to these dogs. So if you truly love this breed, just do everything that you can possibly do to stop bringing heat and stop bringing negative attention to it. We see it happening in different facets and different places. So do your part to maintain it. It is a beautiful breed, and we definitely don't want to see it disappear. Thanks again, and I will be back soon with more videos or a video of Zephyr's progress.